Hello there, and welcome back to Mild History. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Dim the lights, maybe pull a blanket around your shoulders. And if you'd like, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from tonight? It's always comforting to imagine how far these quiet stories travel. Now, let's drift back, farther than most of our stories go. Before the Vikings were raiders or traders, before the longships, before the sagas, we go inland to a narrow fjord where the sea air turns into mist and the hills rise like tired shoulders. Here lives the Viking farmer, not a warrior, not a legend, but a person like any other. And life here is slow, hard, and endlessly cold. The night never really leaves this far north in winter. It lingers, pale gray mornings that feel more like twilight than day. The farmer wakes before the light touches the sky, his eyes already open from the creak of frost in the timbers above him. He doesn't stretch. There's no time for that. The cold bites before his feet even find the floor. He reaches for his wool tunic, rough, scratchy, still faintly damp from the day before, and pulls it over his head. His breath clouds in front of him. Somewhere near the hearth, his wife stirs, wrapping their youngest child in an old sheepskin. The older ones are already awake. They sleep lightly. Hunger and habit teach that. The fire has gone out in the night. It always does. He crouches low, blowing gently on the faintest ember buried in the ash. If it catches, he won't have to start it from stone. If not, the day begins colder. After a few patient breaths, the ember glows orange, trembling like a heartbeat. He feeds it straw, then twigs, and finally, when the small flame sighs into life, a split log. Warmth creeps slowly outward, not enough to comfort, but enough to begin. He doesn't speak yet. Few do this early. Words cost energy, and energy is precious. Their home, the longhouse, is a single open space of wood, clay, and smoke. The rafters sag a little from years of weather, and the smell of animals lingers always. Sheep, chickens, a stubborn cow or two. They all sleep inside in the cold months. It's not for kindness, it's for warmth. The body heat of beasts keeps the air from freezing solid. The floor is packed earth. Straw and waste mix underfoot, though they sweep when they can. Every few days the layer is scraped out and replaced. It doesn't help much. The smoke from the hearth curls lazily through the air, unable to escape. The longhouse has no chimney, only a small vent in the roof that lets the smoke drift upward when the wind allows it. Often it doesn't, so the air inside tastes of wood and sweat, salt and ash. This is home, and it smells like work. Breakfast, if you can call it that, comes in the form of a bowl of sour milk or thin porridge. The grain is coarse, barley or rye, ground unevenly on a stone mill. It crunches a little between the teeth. There's no sugar, no spice, just heat and sustenance. The farmer eats quietly, glancing at the door. The light outside is pale now. Time to begin. The door opens with a groan, and the cold rushes in like water. The air outside smells of pine, frost, and manure. The ground crunches beneath his boots, half-frozen mud, slick and dark. A thin mist clings to the hills where the fields wait, sleeping under frost. Farming in the Viking world is not a peaceful occupation. It's survival, season by season. The land is stingy with its gifts. Soil's thin. The wind tears through the valleys. If the summer is good, the grain might grow tall enough to feed them through the next winter. If it's bad, they will stretch thin gruel further each month, mixing in bark, acorns, or even ground bones to make it last. There's no storehouse of abundance. There's only what the earth decides to give. He takes his tools, a simple wooden plow, its iron tip black with use. The ox that pulls it is slow, ribs visible even under its shaggy hide. Together, they move toward the field. The sound of the plow cutting through frozen soil is heavy, rhythmic, like breathing. One furrow, then another, then another. The farmer doesn't count. There's no point. The field will decide when it's enough. His wife and eldest daughter join him later. They bring baskets of seed, barley mostly, though some oats and rye. They work in silence, scattering the grain with practiced motion, their hands red from cold. The little ones stay near the longhouse, collecting wood, feeding the chickens, keeping the fire alive.
The sun, such as it is, crawls across the sky without warmth. When clouds move in, it disappears entirely. The farmer keeps working. Every breath steams in the air. His back aches. His fingers lose feeling. He doesn't stop. He thinks sometimes of those who went to sea, the ones who chased silver and glory across the waves. But he knows that most of them return empty-handed, if at all. And even if they come back rich, they still come back here, to the same frozen fields, to the same land that owns them more than they own it. By midday, his hands are numb, his stomach hollow again. They eat what they brought, a flat cake of barley, a slice of dried fish, maybe a sip of ale brewed weak for daily use. Then back to the plow. The ox stumbles, tired. The ground resists. He pushes harder, always harder. The earth gives nothing freely. When the light begins to fade, it's hard to tell if the day ever truly began. He turns back toward the house, the weight of the day in his shoulders, his legs trembling. Smoke rises from the roof hole, a sign that the fire still lives. The sight feels almost like joy. Inside, the air is thicker, the warmth fragile. His wife stirs a pot over the fire, stew if they're lucky, or just a thick broth of roots and salt if they're not. The children huddle near the glow, half asleep. He sits, removes his boots, and feels the sting as warmth creeps back into his toes. It hurts, a dull, burning pain that means he's still alive. They eat together, slowly. The stew tastes of smoke and salt, like everything else. Afterwards, he takes his knife and carves quietly at a piece of driftwood, a habit, not an art. Small shapes, a fish, a horse, a rune that means hope. He doesn't say the word. It's bad luck to name it. Before sleep, he looks once more at the door. Beyond it, the night presses close, heavy, silent, endless. Tomorrow will be the same, the day after too. There's comfort in that. The rhythm doesn't change. It is the same rhythm his father knew and his father before him. The last sound before sleep is the ox shifting in its stall and the faint hiss of snow beginning to fall outside. And so another day ends in the Viking North, not with the clang of swords, but with the slow sigh of survival. Hunger, fire, and the work of winter. The days shrink until they are little more than pale moments between darkness. Morning and evening become the same color, gray, cold, and faintly blue. For the Viking farmer, this is not the end of the year, only the pause between labors. Inside the longhouse, the fire is the heart. It smokes, hisses, and sighs, but it never stops breathing. Everything depends on it: warmth, light, food, life. Each dawn begins with the same ritual: lifting the heavy iron pot from the hook, stirring the ashes, coaxing flame from what remains of last night's coals. The sound of a spark catching is the softest kind of victory. Hunger waits in the corners. By midwinter, the grain stores are low. The dried fish grows brittle. The smoked meat thins to strips. Every mouthful is measured. Children are taught early to eat slowly, to chew until the flavor fades, to be grateful even for blandness. Waste is a sin, not of religion, but of survival. Outside, the land sleeps under a hard shell of snow. The farmer walks across it, boots crunching, breath white in the air. His axe rests across his shoulder. Today's work is not plowing or sowing, but gathering, cutting firewood, checking the animal pens, breaking the ice on the water trough. The trees cracked like glass when struck. Each log split is a small assurance against the night. When the wind rises, it moans through every seam of the longhouse. The walls shudder, frost crawls inward along the beams. He seals gaps with moss and wool, pressing them in with calloused fingers. The smoke curls thicker, making eyes water, but better to cough than to freeze. His wife mends clothes by the dim light of the hearth. Her needle glints once, then vanishes in shadow. The children twist wool into coarse yarn, hands clumsy but patient. No one wastes daylight on idleness. Even sitting still must serve a purpose. By midday, they share the first meal, a thin broth of cabbage and barley. If the sea was kind that year, a small piece of dried fish will soften in the pot, lending salt and memory of summer. They eat without hurry. The warmth spreads slowly, more comforting than the taste. Afternoons fade quickly. When the light begins to dim, he visits the byre to tend the animals. The cow's breath steams in the dark. The sheep stamp their hooves, restless. He rubs frost from their muzzles and refills the hay racks. The animals are thin too, but they must live until spring. Without them, the family will not. Sometimes, while spreading straw, he speaks to them softly, not words, just sounds. It feels less lonely that way. At dusk, the snow glows faintly outside, reflecting what little light the sky has left. Inside, shadows grow long.
The sun, such as it is, crawls across the sky without warmth. When clouds move in, it disappears entirely. The farmer keeps working. Every breath steams in the air. His back aches. His fingers lose feeling. He doesn't stop. He thinks sometimes of those who went to sea, the ones who chased silver and glory across the waves. But he knows that most of them return empty-handed, if at all. And even if they come back rich, they still come back here, to the same frozen fields, to the same land that owns them more than they own it. By midday, his hands are numb, his stomach hollow again. They eat what they brought, a flat cake of barley, a slice of dried fish, Maybe a sip of ale, brewed weak for daily use, then back to the plow. The ox stumbles, tired. The ground resists. He pushes harder, always harder. The earth gives nothing freely. When the light begins to fade, it's hard to tell if the day ever truly began. He turns back toward the house, the weight of the day in his shoulders, his legs trembling. Smoke rises from the roof hole, a sign that the fire still lives. The sight feels almost like joy. Inside, the air is thicker, the warmth fragile. His wife stirs a pot over the fire. Stew if they're lucky, or just a thick broth of roots and salt if they're not. The children huddle near the glow, half asleep. He sits, removes his boots, and feels the sting as warmth creeps back into his toes. It hurts, a dull, burning pain that means he's still alive. They eat together slowly. The stew tastes of smoke and salt like everything else. Afterward, he takes his knife and carves quietly at a piece of driftwood, a habit, not an art. Small shapes, a fish, a horse, a rune that means hope. He doesn't say the word. It's bad luck to name it. Before sleep, he looks once more at the door. Beyond it, the night presses close, heavy, silent, and endless. Tomorrow will be the same. The day after, too. There is comfort in that. The rhythm doesn't change. It is the same rhythm his father knew, and his father before him. The last sound before sleep is the ox shifting in its stall, and the faint hiss of snow beginning to fall outside. And so, another day ends in the Viking North, not with the clang of swords, but with the slow sigh of survival. Hunger, fire, and the work of winter. The days shrink until they are little more than pale moments between darkness. Morning and evening become the same color, gray, cold, and faintly blue. For the Viking farmer, this is not the end of the year, only the pause between labors. Inside the longhouse, the fire is the heart. It smokes, hisses, and sighs, but it never stops breathing. Everything depends on it: warmth, light, food, life. Each dawn begins with the same ritual: lifting the heavy iron pot from the hook, stirring the ashes, coaxing flame from what remains of last night's coals. The sound of a spark catching is the softest kind of victory. Hunger waits in the corners. By midwinter, the grain stores are low. The dried fish grows brittle. The smoked meat thins to strips. Every mouthful is measured. Children are taught early to eat slowly, to chew until the flavor fades, to be grateful even for blandness. Waste is a sin not of religion, but of survival. Outside, the land sleeps under a hard shell of snow. The farmer walks across it, boots crunching, breath white in the air. His axe rests across his shoulder. Today's work is not plowing or sowing, but gathering, cutting firewood, checking the animal pens, breaking the ice on the water trough. The trees crack like glass when struck. Each log split is a small assurance against the night. When the wind rises, it moans through every seam of the longhouse. The walls shudder, frost crawls inward along the beams. He seals gaps with moss and wool, pressing them in with calloused hands. The smoke curls thicker, making eyes water, but better to cough than to freeze. His wife mends clothes by the dim light of the hearth. Her needle glints once, then vanishes in shadow. The children twist wool into coarse yarn, hands clumsy but patient. No one wastes daylight on idleness. Even sitting still must serve a purpose. By midday,
They share the first meal, a thin broth of cabbage and barley. If the sea was kind that year, a small piece of dried fish will soften in the pot, lending salt and memory of summer. They eat without hurry. The warmth spreads slowly, more comforting than the taste. Afternoons fade quickly. When the light begins to dim, he visits the byre to tend the animals. The cow's breath steams in the dark. The sheep stamp their hooves restless. He rubs frost from their muzzles and refills the hay racks. The animals are thin, too, but they must live until spring. Without them, the family will not. Sometimes, while spreading straw, he speaks to them softly. Not words, just sounds. It feels less lonely that way. At dusk, the snow glows faintly outside, reflecting what little light the sky has left. Inside, shadows grow long.
The fire pops. A spark leaps and dies on the floor. His wife hums a low tune, one she learned from her mother, half lullaby, half prayer. It speaks of the sun returning, of fields reborn, of patience rewarded. The farmer listens, eyes closed, hands folded on his knees. He doesn't believe in much beyond the next day, but the song warms something older than belief. He imagines the fields green again, the ox strong, his children grown. Then he opens his eyes to the smoke-stained rafters and remembers that future is still many snows away. The night stretches, long and heavy. Outside, the wind prowls like an animal. Inside, the longhouse breathes, creaks, sighs, and murmurs of sleep. The fire's glow paints the walls with slow-moving light. He drifts half awake, counting the crackles as though they were heartbeats. This is winter work, to wait, to endure, to keep the fire alive one more night. The long hunger and the return of light. There comes a point in winter when time loses its shape. Days do not pass, they simply fold into one another like layers of frost. The sun becomes a rumor, pale, distant, barely more than a reflection on snow. Inside the longhouse, people forget the feel of warmth on their faces. They move through dim air heavy with smoke and silence. Food grows scarcer. The barley bin echoes when the lid closes. The salted meat smells sharper, older. The dried fish crackles when broken, the sound too loud in the quiet room. Each meal becomes a memory of plenty, a handful of crumbs, a measure of grain stretched thin with water, the slow stirring of a pot that will never quite fill the bowl. Children dream of apples, of butter, of milk warm from the cow. The youngest sometimes cry at night, too hungry to sleep, and the mother hums softly, not to quiet them, but to share their restlessness. There are no grand words, no sermons about endurance, only the sound of her voice, steady and low, like the fire's whisper. Dreams turn strange this time of year. The farmer wakes from sleep certain he can smell the sea, the wet salt wind of summer. He hears gulls calling in his mind, though the roof is crusted with ice. In his dream, he stands in a field green with new shoots, and when he bends to touch them, they crumble to snow. He does not tell anyone. They all have the same dreams. When storms come, they sound like war. The wind batters the walls until the beams groan,
The roof straw scatters, and smoke whirls madly. The family huddles close to the hearth. The fire spits as if angry, flames clawing for air. The youngest clutches a carved wooden horse, worn smooth from many hands. The father tightens the door latch and waits. It always passes, eventually. To break the sameness, someone tells a story. It begins the same way every winter. Once, when the gods still walked among us. No one believes in those tales anymore, not truly, but they speak them anyway. The rhythm of the words is a kind of warmth. They speak of Odin wandering in disguise, of Thor's hammer found in a giant's hall, of Freya's tears turning to gold. When the story ends, the silence feels less heavy. Sometimes the farmer counts what is left. He doesn't do it aloud. Grain sacks, dried fish, wood for the fire. He touches each as though counting blessings or debts. He knows how many days they can last. He does not tell his wife the true number. There is no point. It will either be enough or it won't. At night, the air tastes of smoke and iron. The longhouse creaks like an old ship caught in ice. Someone coughs. The sound echoes. The cows stamp restlessly, sensing something. Maybe the wind shifting. Maybe spring's first whisper far away. The farmer lies awake and listens. He imagines the taw, water dripping from eaves, mud underfoot, birds returning. The thought is almost painful in its brightness. And then one morning, it happens quietly. The light is different, still pale, still thin, but there. It touches the edge of the doorway, glints on the snow outside. He stands there, blinking against it. For the first time in months, his shadow has shape again. He steps out, crunching through the crusted snow, and breathes air that smells faintly of earth, not ice. Inside, his wife lifts her face toward the light filtering through the smoke hole. The children squint, smiling though they do not understand why. The animals stir. Even the fire seems to burn brighter, as if remembering something. There is still hunger. There is still cold, but they can see the end of it now. The sun will grow stronger, the fields will thaw, and the work will begin again. The hard, endless, necessary work of living. He goes to the byre and opens the door. The cold hits his face, but beneath it he smells straw, damp and alive. The cow snorts softly, and for the first time he laughs, though it sounds strange in the quiet air. He doesn't stop to think about why.
Inside the longhouse, the fire crackles. Outside, water drips from the eaves, slow, steady, like a heartbeat. The year turns, the dark has been survived, and in the stillness that follows, before the day truly begins, he stands there and simply listens. To the melting snow, to the small movements of life returning, to the whisper of spring, far but certain. The return of the sun and the work of spring. Spring does not arrive all at once in the north. It creeps. It hesitates. It comes not with bird song or flowers, but with small sounds, the drip of water, the soft sigh of thawing earth, the crack of ice breaking on the river. After months of silence, even these are a kind of music. The Viking farmer steps outside one morning and notices the difference. The air is no longer biting. It carries a damp scent, faintly sweet and metallic. The snow still lies in patches, but dark soil shows through. The sun sits a little higher, no longer a ghost in the sky, but a pale companion who seems, at last, to be returning home. He feels it in his bones, the shift, the stirring. Winter is not yet gone, but its hold is loosening. And with that loosening comes work. Always work. He goes to the storehouse to take stock. The barley sacks are light, almost empty. The seed grain, carefully set aside in autumn, must be guarded like treasure. Each kernel is a promise, and promises are rare things in this land. He lifts a handful, lets them fall through his fingers. They smell of dust and life. Inside, his wife beats the winter dust from wool blankets and hangs them outside. The wind catches them, tugging like a child. For the first time in months, sunlight slips through the smoke hole, tracing a line of gold across the floor. It feels fragile, like something that might vanish if stared at too long. Spring begins, not in celebration, but in labor. There is no feast, no songs, no idle talk. The farmer mends tools, the wooden plow, the iron hoe, the simple rake. His hands are cracked from cold, but sure in their movements. Each groove of the handle fits his grip perfectly, worn by years of use. These tools are as much a part of him as his own breath. The oxen are brought out, their hides dull from the long winter indoors. They snort and stamp, smelling the air. He rubs their necks, speaks to them in low tones. The animals are slow to wake, stiff in their joints, like him. But soon they will pull the plow again, and the world will open under their hooves. The first furrows are cut into the earth while frost still clings to the edges. The sound is deep, a tearing, a breathing. The plow sinks, the soil parts, dark and damp beneath the surface. Steam rises faintly in the morning chill. Each pass across the field is a line drawn between survival and loss. His wife follows with the seed bag, scattering grain in measured sweeps. Her steps are steady. Her eyes never lift from the ground. There is rhythm in this, almost music. Step, statter, whisper a word to the earth. Step, scatter, whisper again. Some call it prayer, though she would not use that word. It is simply what must be done. Children trail behind, pressing the soil with bare feet, laughing though their hands are red with cold. They do not yet understand the weight of this season, how the smallest mistake could mean hunger again when winter returns. Their laughter carries across the field, startling the crows. The day stretches long. The light has changed, softer, wider. In the distance, meltwater glitters where the river runs free again. The smell of damp soil fills the air, heavy and good. After so many months of smoke and salt and wood ash, it feels almost intoxicating. When the work is done, they rest by the field's edge. The farmer wipes his brow and looks at the horizon where the sky glows faintly pink. There are still snow patches on the far hills, but he knows they will fade soon. The cycle has begun again. That night, the fire burns smaller. They eat a meal of boiled roots and dried herbs. No feast, but enough.
He sits near the doorway, watching the last light fade. The earth outside is quiet, but alive now, a sleeping animal stirring. He feels a strange mix of exhaustion and hope, both heavy and light. Before bed, he steps outside once more. The stars have returned, sharp and bright, their light trembling on the river. He breathes in the night air and thinks not in words, but in rhythm. Of furrows, of seeds, of all that will grow if the gods are kind. And when he returns inside, he glances once more at his children, sleeping beside the dying fire. The room smells of smoke, wool, and earth. He closes his eyes, knowing that tomorrow will be the same. Work, hunger, laughter, and the endless, slow, beautiful turning of the world.
The season of sweat and sun. Summer arrives like a sudden memory, bright, green, and almost unreal. The air smells of wet grass and smoke. The sky opens wider than seems possible, and the sun, so long hidden, refuses to rest. It circles the horizon like a watchful eye, dipping but never quite disappearing. The nights are no longer dark, only pale, endless twilights where time feels uncertain. For the Viking farmer, summer is both gift and burden. It is the only time when the land gives freely, and the only time when every moment must be used to prepare for its silence again. The days are long, but not long enough. He wakes before the light fully breaks and steps into the chill morning. Mist hangs low over the fields, glowing faintly gold where the sun touches it. Dew clings to every blade of grass. His breath clouds, but soon the warmth will come, and with it the long, slow labor of survival. The first task is the hay. It must be cut, dried, and stacked high before the weather turns. He swings the scythe in slow, practiced arcs. The sound of it is steady and soft. Swish, swish, the whisper of metal through grass. Each stroke lays another line of green to dry in the sun. By midday, sweat runs down his back. The smell of cut hay is thick and sweet, filling the air like a memory of life itself. His wife and children follow behind, turning the grass with wooden forks so it dries evenly. The smallest child gathers wildflowers that grow between the rows, bright yellow buttercups and purple clover. The mother lets her keep them. Even in hard seasons, beauty has its place. When the sun stands high, they stop to eat. Bread, hard as wood. Cheese, dry but sharp. They sit in the grass, chew slowly, and watch the insects dance above the hay. The river glints in the distance. For a moment, there is peace. Then the work begins again. Later, when the hay is dry, they pile it onto sledges and drag it to the barn. It smells of sunlight and effort. He stacks it high in the loft, careful to keep it dry. Each bundle is a future, food for the cattle, warmth for the longhouse, a promise against hunger. He pats the top of the pile as though it were a sleeping animal. Then he goes back for more. Beyond the fields, there are other labors. The fences must be mended, the nets checked, the tools sharpened. If the family lives near the coast, the men take the small boat out to fish. The sea glimmers like hammered metal, calm at dawn, cruel by evening. They row in silence, lines trailing in the water, waiting. Patience is as necessary as strength. Sometimes the farmer helps his neighbors raise a roof or dig a new well.
There are no idle hands in summer. Each man's labor keeps the village alive. They share what little they can, a day's help, a borrowed tool, a shared jug of ale when the work is done. The laughter that follows is quiet but real, rolling like the tide. In the evenings, when the air cools, the women gather by the stream to wash clothes. The sound of water slapping stone fills the valley. Their talk drifts like smoke. Small things, soft things, how the geese have grown, how much fish the men caught, how the youngest learned to walk. The world is harsh, but in summer it almost forgives. As night comes, or what passes for night, the longhouse glows faintly with firelight. The smell of peat smoke and hay clings to everything. The children fall asleep quickly, their hair tangled, their hands still sticky with honey or dirt. His farmer sits by the door, sharpening his scythe. Each stroke of the whetstone sings softly in the quiet air. His wife brings him a cup of thin ale, and for a while they say nothing. Words are not needed. The silence of shared exhaustion is its own kind of closeness. He looks out over the land, the green fields, the distant sea, the faint shimmer of light still clinging to the horizon, and feels both small and infinite. The gods, if they are watching, give no sign, but the earth itself feels alive again, and that is enough. Tomorrow will bring more of the same, more grass to cut, more fish to catch, more earth to tend. It is endless, but not empty. Every swing of the scythe, every seed, every breath is part of a story that began long before him and will go on long after. He sets the blade aside, stands and stretches. The air smells of warmth and smoke and living things. Somewhere beyond the hills, a wolf howls. Not a threat, but a reminder. The wild is still here, watching, waiting, sharing the same summer night. The farmer steps inside. The fire hums low. He lies beside his family, the floor warm from the day's heat. The longhouse creaks gently, settling like an old body at rest. Outside, the light never truly dies. It only softens. And in that soft, endless twilight, the Viking farmer sleeps.
The short joy of harvest and the fear of change. The end of summer arrives quietly. There is no line where one season stops and another begins. Only a shift in the air, a change in light. The wind grows cooler. The days shrink, though only by moments at first. The grass yellows, the insects slow, and the sun seems to rest a little lower in the sky each evening. The earth exhales, and the Viking farmer knows what that means. It is time to harvest. This is the season that decides everything. The summer's labor, the long months of sweat and patience, all come down to this: what the earth will yield back. If the gods are kind, or if the weather has been kind, there will be enough. If not, there will be hunger again. He sharpens his sickle, wipes the blade clean, and steps into the field. The grain stands tall and golden, swaying softly in the breeze. It looks eternal, endless, but he knows better. He knows how quickly the storms can come and flatten it to the ground. He knows that one bad week can undo an entire year. So he works quickly, quietly, with purpose. The first stalks fall under the blade with a dry whisper.
He binds them into sheaves and lays them in rows, the rhythm familiar, almost soothing. Behind him, his family works in a slow procession. Wife, children, neighbors, all moving together, all silent except for the rustle of straw and the occasional murmur of breath. This is not a time for talk. It is a time for gathering, for being careful, for keeping fear in check. By midday, the field is half cut. The sun burns overhead, still strong, but gentler now, as if it too has grown tired. The smell of ripe grain fills the air, sweet, dry, and faintly dusty. The farmer straightens his back and looks around. Everywhere he sees the same motion, bent figures moving through the gold, the shimmer of blades, the slow rhythm of survival. When the day ends, the harvested sheaves stand in small stacks, neat and patient. The field looks wounded, but clean, the stubble catching the last light like tiny fires. They walk home carrying bundles on their shoulders, their clothes damp with sweat and dust. The ache in their arms feels honest. It means they will eat. That night, the long house smells of earth and smoke and bread baking on the hearthstone. The sound of laughter, quiet, brief, ripples through the room. For once, they allow themselves to eat until full. The bread is coarse, the butter thin, but it tastes like victory. The children fall asleep quickly, faces flushed, bellies warm. The farmer and his wife sit a while longer, watching the fire. They do not speak of next year, not yet. Tonight, they are simply grateful. But even in peace, there is unease. The farmer knows that harvest joy is always short-lived. Once the fields are cleared, another kind of work begins. Storing, drying, counting, guarding. The harvest must last the winter, and the winter will always come. In the days that follow, the longhouse turns into a storehouse. The floor is covered in sacks of grain, bundles of herbs, baskets of onions and roots. The smell is sharp, alive. Smoke from the drying racks clings to everything. His wife stirs the pots of preserved meat, sealing them with fat. Every task is done with care. Every small sound, the lid of a jar closing, the scrape of a shovel on wood, carries the weight of preparation. At night, the farmer walks the edge of his land. The fields are empty now, the stubble brittle beneath his feet. The air carries the scent of autumn, faint decay, fallen leaves, a whisper of cold. He watches them, silent, as if seeing them off on a long journey. In some way he is. They are leaving what he must stay to endure. Sometimes there are gatherings, neighbors helping each other finish late harvests, small feasts where mead is shared and songs rise into the crisp air. The songs are not joyful exactly, but steady, deep. They speak of the land, of ancestors, of time turning and returning. He hums along, his voice low and rough from the day's work. As the month wanes, he feels the shift more clearly. The mornings bite again. Frost gathers on the thatch. The animals grow thick-coated and restless. It is time to bring them closer, to mend the pens, and to prepare once more for confinement. On the final night of harvest, he stands outside the longhouse and listens. The wind has changed direction. It comes from the north now, cold, dry, certain. He pulls his cloak tighter and watches his breath drift upward, pale against the dark. The stars seem sharper, the moon colder. Behind him, the firelight flickers through the door, warm and fragile. He steps back inside. The season of plenty is over. The season of waiting begins again.
The long nights of fear and faith. The first snow never arrives with ceremony. It drifts in one morning, pale, silent, and almost shy, dusting the roofs of the long houses and the blackened fences. No one cheers for it. No one welcomes it. They only nod, as if greeting an old, predictable enemy. The Viking farmer steps outside, his boots sinking into the thin crust. The world feels smaller now, quieter. The fields lie empty beneath their white shroud, and the river moves sluggishly, edged with ice. He pulls his cloak tighter and stares at the horizon. The light has changed. It's softer, grayer, a light that doesn't warm, only lingers. Inside the long house, the fire burns constantly. It is not for comfort anymore. It is for survival. The smoke curls lazily toward the rafters, staining them darker with each passing day. The air smells of wood and wool and damp earth. Outside, the world is frozen, but inside, the heat makes time blur. Every day feels like the one before. The rhythm of life slows, but it never stops. The animals must still be fed, the tools must be mended, the children must be kept busy, or else the endless confinement will make them restless, loud, and eventually reckless. There are no fields to tend now, no fishing boats to sail, only waiting, waiting for light, for warmth, for the earth to breathe again. It is during these long nights that stories return. The farmer's wife, seated near the hearth, spins wool and speaks softly to the children. Her voice is low and steady, the kind that feels like a lullaby, even when the words are grim. She tells of trolls in the mountains, of spirits that wander between the trees, of gods who watch and judge in silence. Her hands move automatically, pulling, twisting, winding, as if the rhythm of her spinning wheel keeps the world from falling apart. The children listen, wide-eyed, their faces glowing in the firelight. They've heard the stories 100 times, but in Minter they sound truer. When the wind howls outside and snow rattles against the wooden walls, it is easy to believe that something ancient and unseen is moving through the dark, something that remembers every broken oath, every missed offering. The farmer believes it too, though he'd never say it aloud. When he steps outside to check the roof or fetch water, he whispers small words under his breath. Not prayers exactly, more like apologies to the gods, to the land, to whatever listens when men are alone in the snow. He is not a devout man, but he is a cautious one. Faith in this world is less about worship and more about survival, a way of not being foolish. No one wants to offend a spirit in winter, not when the nights stretch on endlessly and the line between the living and the dead feels thin as breath. At the center of the long house, the fire becomes its own kind of altar. Offerings of bread or fat are tossed into the flames. Sometimes a small carving of wood, a token shaped like a hammer or a beast, is left near the hearthstone. The smoke rises, curling toward the roof beams like a message carried upward. They don't expect answers, only balance. There are nights when the wind sounds almost human. It moans across the hills and through the gaps in the walls, a sound that makes even the strongest men pause. The farmer lies awake, listening. His wife breathes softly beside him, the children curled like kittens near the fire. He stares at the roof where frost creeps along the beams. Somewhere outside, an animal cries, long, distant, mournful. He tells himself it's just a fox, but deep down he feels the echo of something older, something watching. The people of the North lived with that feeling, that sense of being seen by the dark. They did not call it fear. It was simply knowledge, a knowing that life existed by the mercy of unseen hands, that the fire burned only because the gods allowed it, that every harvest, every breath was alone. So they honored the old ways. In the deepest part of winter came Yule, the great festival that would one day become Christmas. For 12 nights, the farmer's family would give thanks to the gods and to their ancestors. The long house would be cleaned, new fires lit, and food shared, not in abundance, but in respect. A small cup of ale for Odin, a slice of bread for the dead. Each gift mattered, each one kept the balance. On those nights, neighbors might gather. The long house would fill with bodies, their breath misting the air, the sound of laughter echoing off the beams. The talk would start with weather, move to trade, and always end with tales of things that walked in the snow. A flicker of superstition, a shared shiver, then a laugh to shake it off. But no one laughed too loudly.
Sometimes, during Yule, they would burn a great log, the Yule log, large enough to last the night. As it burned, sparks would fly upward, and people would make wishes or silent vows. The smoke smelled of resin and pine and hope. For a moment, the darkness outside seemed to pull back, retreating into the trees. For a moment, they felt safe. But safety was never certain. In winter, sickness moved easily through the longhouse. Smoke and breath and cold air mingled, a perfect home for fevers. When someone coughed too long or shivered without reason, they lit extra candles. They whispered the names of healing gods, Air, Frigg, sometimes even Christ, if a priest had passed through months ago. Faith was flexible. Whatever worked was welcome. The farmer knew death well enough to be polite to it. When a neighbor passed, he went to help bury them, deep enough to stay undisturbed, with stones on top to keep wolves away. The ground was hard as iron, and the digging slow. No one spoke much. The silence was respect and fear. Death in winter always felt heavier. Days passed in this gray rhythm, waking, tending fire, feeding animals, mending tools, sleeping. The sound of the axe outside, the creak of the door, the low murmur of prayer, all became one nightmare. The sun rose late and set early, until the line between morning and night disappeared completely. Sometimes, the farmer would lose track of days altogether. He would step outside to find the sky the same dull silver it had been the day before, the day before that, and the day before that. Time flattened. He stopped thinking in days. He began thinking in fires. Each new pile of wood meant another chance to see dawn. Inside, the children played small games, carving shapes from wood, arranging stones, listening to stories. The wife sang softly while working, her voice thin but steady. Her songs were old ones, half prayers, half lullabies. The words didn't always make sense anymore, but the rhythm did. It filled the empty hours with something that felt like warmth. As the weeks passed, something strange happened. They grew used to it. The dark stopped feeling like an enemy. It became a companion, predictable, calm, even comforting in its silence. The world outside had shrunk to the size of the longhouse, and that was enough. Still, there were moments, late at night when the fire burned low, when the farmer thought of summer. He saw the fields in his mind, golden and alive, the wind soft and full of promise. He thought of the river free of ice and the feel of sunlight on his skin. He wondered if he would live to see it again. He always hoped yes. But hope, too, was a quiet thing, fragile, small, and flickering like a candle in a draft. And so through the long nights, he kept the fire alive. Each log placed with care, each ember coaxed back to life. That fire was everything. It was warmth, light, prayer, and promise, all at once. Without it, there was only silence. By the time the days began to stretch again, so faintly he could barely notice, the world outside was still frozen, but something inside had shifted. The fear had softened. Faith had settled in its place. He no longer looked to the sky for signs. He only looked to the fire and the faces of his family beside it. Winter would not end soon, but he could endure it. He always had. The first day that feels like spring doesn't come with sunshine. It comes with sound. A faint dripping, water sliding from the eaves, trickling down into the thawing ground. The air smells different too, sharp but alive. When the farmer steps outside that morning, the snow is still deep but soft underfoot. He can feel the earth stirring beneath it. He knows the season has begun to turn. It is not joy he feels, not exactly. It's something quieter, a kind of relief that feels too fragile to name. The light returns in cautious steps. The sun lingers a little longer at the horizon. Smoke rises straighter from the chimneys, and the world, after so many months of silence, begins to breathe again. The animals sense it before the people do. The goats butt their heads against the gate. The chickens start to scratch in the thawing dirt. Even the dog, gray with age, sits by the door, as if waiting for something unseen to arrive. And it does. Slowly, steadily, the wind warms, the frost weakens, the earth wakes. Inside the longhouse, the air still smells of smoke and straw, but the fire burns smaller now.